Hello, I'm Jack Blanchard.
And I'm Dasha Burns. It is Monday, June 16th.
And this is the Playbook podcast. Good morning, Dasha. How are you and how was your weekend?
Good morning. Happy Monday. There was rain. There were parades. There were protests. I mean, everyone got a little taste of everything this weekend.
A little taste of everything. I got a taste for a house full of 6-year-olds because it was my daughter's birthday and there's nothing more relentlessly exhausting than that. But I still found time to listen to your excellent podcast with Richard Grenell.
Oh, I'm honored.
Richard is how we've been asked to refer to him now. He used to be Rick Grenell, but now he's the artist formerly known as Rick Grenell.
Now it is Richard.
Now it is Richard because he's a serious guy. It's a serious interview. I mean, there's some absolutely incredible moments where I genuinely really enjoyed it. Just what was your most jaw-dropping moment?
There was really, truly so much in there from his take on the politics of California, which I thought was really interesting, the potential that he might run for governor, and he sees an opening there for whether it's himself or another Republican, to his take, which was quite viral over the weekend, on what he calls normal gays.
Right. I was watching that on YouTube and your eyes just sort of flicker a bit and you're like, what's a normal gay?
I mean, he's somebody that has been an out gay man in Republican politics for a very long time. And
Sure.
He has some controversial opinions and really opens up about what he believes, where the gay community is at in our culture and in our politics, and what he thinks is wrong and right about where we are. This was an interview that was kind of like the reason why we're doing a podcast like this, where it's like you give people space to really go there with what they believe and where they are. And, you know, it's up to the people that listen to react to it, right? But like, it was fascinating to hear from somebody that has been navigating Republican politics for so long and is now in a position where, you know, he's a special envoy to special missions for the Trump administration. So he kind of just like does whatever Trump calls him up and says, like, Rick, can you go do that? And he does it. Right now it's Kennedy Center and Venezuela and some other foreign policy issues. We really go deep on a lot of this stuff. So if you haven't heard it, take a listen. Let me know what you think.
The conversation with Dasha Burns and Richard Grenell. Let's talk about the stories that are driving today because, oh my God, there's so many of them. The news cycle here is completely insane. I was just thinking back as I was getting ready to record. We were chatting last Thursday morning, last time you and I, right?
Yeah.
And we were talking about the unrest in Los Angeles. Since Thursday, listen to this. I wrote out a list. Listen, we had the manhandling and handcuffing of a United States senator. That seems almost like years ago now. We had Israel's extraordinary strikes on Iran, the subsequent military back and forth. We've seen that. We've had what is being reported to be the biggest day of protest the United States has ever seen, the biggest military parade in DC in decades. We've had a political assassination, and we've had extraordinary U-turns back and forth on immigration policy, all since Thursday morning.
Thank you for that list, Jack, because I really do think it's incredibly difficult for us to keep track, let alone most of the American people who are living it. And yet, day to day, it's like, wait, what just happened?
In terms of us picking what's going to be driving the stories today, Donald Trump last night flew to Canada. He is at the G7 summit today. And so he'll be sitting down with lots of world leaders all through the next couple of days. And they will be talking about many of the big issues facing the world. And we should get into those in a minute, Dasha. But obviously the Middle East, obviously trade, given the people he's talking to, are going to dominate. I think Ukraine as well, given Zelenskyy is there with them. And Trump will just keep making news from there because that's what he does. Let's talk about all that in a sec, though, because a couple of other things we've really got to mention that will be driving the conversation all day today in DC. 8:45 p.m. last night, Donald Trump got on Truth Social. He made a big, long statement about ICE and immigration raids. And really, we're seeing quite a big shift here in ICE's focus. The way he presented it last night was as a new, clear focus on what he calls our crime-ridden and deadly inner cities. And he basically wants the ICE raids to focus on big Democrat cities like LA, like New York, like Chicago. And that is a very political thing for him to say, given that these are much more liberally minded places than what he calls the heartland.
It's very political, but it's also a pivot away from something that was causing him a problem, which was farmlands and farm country, where the day laborers, people that work on those farms who are often undocumented, and farmers. And by the way, according to some reporting from the New York Times and others, Brooke Rollins, who's the agriculture secretary, saying this is going to be a real issue for people that are trying to put food on the tables of Americans and export goods. And you saw him start to shift in messaging earlier in the weekend where he said, well, wait a minute, I've been getting calls from farmers and people in hospitality saying that our aggressive ICE tactics are a problem for them. So he's trying to sort of, with this, tackle two things at once, which is, on the one hand, the ICE raids have been a problem for industries that do rely on immigrant labor, legal and illegal, and also lash out at cities that have had protests that have been less than friendly to the president and do harbor a lot of undocumented people.
The reporting from the New York Times over the weekend, as you say, was that he got this call from the Agriculture Secretary. She basically talked him into, let's stop focusing on farms. And that order was made internally. If you look at how that was being received online by the MAGA faithful, it was not good. Like, people didn't really like this idea that it was suddenly going to be areas of the country and areas of the economy where ICE wouldn't be focused. So it's not surprising to me that he's tried to come out and own this in a sort of positive, MAGA-friendly way, which is like, no, this is all about getting the Dems and getting those awful sanctuary cities. You've got to get behind this and trying to win some support for, as you say, what's essentially an economic and politically minded refocusing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was watching some of the MAGA influencer action online in response to this, and understandably and expectedly, there was a lot of backlash from some of the far right, but there was a little bit more of a mix than I frankly expected. And I think the messaging on this is going to be so important to how the right is going to read this. And then there's just the brass tacks of business. And I think a lot of business owners, farmers, like the people that have the very real on the ground ties to this issue, are a little bit surprised that it seems like it's come as a surprise to the Trump administration that, like, oh, wait a minute, this kind of the Stephen Miller approach to immigration would just like swoop up everybody and anybody that might potentially be here illegally is not working out so well economically for some of the people that supported President Trump. It's been reported that he's relied on immigrant labor, legal and illegal, in a lot of his hotels and properties as well. So it's interesting that that's coming to a head now when it's been an expected conflict.
Reality bites. Let's talk about the third big topic that everyone will be talking about in DC today as well, which of course is the horrific killing at the weekend in Minnesota of a state politician, Melissa Hortman, and her husband. State Senator John Hoffman was shot, and his wife. We heard last night that the chief suspect in those attacks was apprehended in Minnesota. He had a hit list of other Democratic lawmakers as well. Congress people coming back to work on the Hill today are being briefed on security. Obviously, absolutely terrifying lots of people, Dasha. I mean, the amount of political violence we've seen in this country over the past 12 months and indeed longer is just jaw-dropping, honestly.
Yeah, and it has no sort of political identity. And what's terrifying to me is some of the commentary online that this is now becoming sort of the new school shooting, right? The new school shooting where you would hope that it would be these rare incidents and that we would tamp it down, that the action would be taken, and it's starting to become almost as prolific and as expected in this country as that. And our colleague Jonathan Martin posted something online that really resonated with me, which is like, there's so much about this that's really devastating, but like really long term, one of the worst aspects of this is all of the talent that this will preclude from getting into politics. Again, across the board, on both sides of the aisle, people are seeing this and think, why would I put myself in a position to be a target like this? Think of the talent that we are losing. And in a place like the United States that is supposed to be the beacon of free speech and democracy and liberty, and it's really heartbreaking.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, we better get on to the main event of the day, which is the president in Canada. So many different things that they're going to be discussing there at the G7, so many different major topics. Donald Trump's day is kicking off with a bilateral meeting with Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister of Canada, is obviously hosting it. I guess the main thing they will want to be talking about is trade, Dasha, given the history of US-Canada over the last few months. Donald Trump's been promising us all these trade deals. There don't seem to be any closer to fruition apart from the one with the UK that we saw a few weeks back now. And it's hard to believe we're going to see some big breakthrough with Canada today.
However, trade does seem to be the primary tool, the primary weapon that he's wielding as he's trying to make deals that both have to do with the economy and even peace deals. I mean, he invoked trade when talking about Israel and Iran. He likened that negotiation to India and Pakistan and to some others where he was like, oh, I leveraged our economy and our ability to make these trade deals and tariffs and all of that to bring people to the table. All of this stuff is now intermixed at this pressure cooker moment in real war and peace foreign policy plus economic foreign policy. That stuff is almost inextricable, especially in the mind of this president that really sees that as his best diplomatic weapon.
Absolutely. And of course, the violence in the Middle East will just be the backdrop to this whole summit now. And of course, every time any of the leaders has a press conference, they're going to get asked about it, because the way that has developed over the last few days is obviously turning this into a major seismic seminal moment for the future of the Middle East.
And given how hot this is, it's a very tender topic right now, right? And we've seen and we've reported on the evolution of how President Trump has talked about it, from that statement from Marco Rubio that was very much, we had nothing to do with this, to then President Trump leaning more into what Israel is doing, to then saying, like, this is an opportunity to bring peace and for us to use trade to bring folks to the table. I mean, Israel and Iran is something that has really fractured the MAGA right and the Republican right on this, because there are folks that are all across the board on how the president should be responding to this. And you've been seeing the fights play out online. And a lot of folks on the right are very frustrated that this has come into the fold at a time when they feel like the president has the wind at his back on issues of immigration and other things. And this is a distraction. But the problem is, it's not like this little distraction. It's something that is fundamentally a massive problem for this administration and for the entire world that is front and center. You can't brush this off.
Unfortunately, we're well used to seeing violence in the Middle East, but what we're seeing here is something on a completely different scale. Politically, people now openly talking about possible regime change in Iran. That would be completely rewriting the map in the Middle East if it were to get to that point.
And that's exactly what a lot of the America First MAGA right doesn't want the U.S. to get involved in. That was what the president ran on. And at the same time, there are plenty of Republicans that are like, no, this is Israel. These are issues that we absolutely have to be involved in. This is the potential for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. I mean, this strikes at the heart of some of the fundamental policy disagreements within the party that is in power.
And you can still hear Trump making noises about getting Iran back to the table and cutting some sort of different type of deal. I thought there was a really interesting to see a story out on Sunday afternoon about Trump telling Israel not to take out the leader of Iran, the Ayatollah. That was a story that was run in a couple of different places, and there are obviously US administration officials prepared to stand that story up when talking to journalists. It sounded to me like something that maybe the Trump administration was quite happy to be out there and for Iran to be aware that it was sort of saying to Israel, this far but no further. And that sounds like something you might do if you're hoping to get them back to the table for another round of talks.
There's a lot of narrative massaging being done in the press and on social media right now that is extremely deliberate and very strategic. And it's interesting to also watch it and analyze, who wants what headlines out there in this moment.
We must just say as well, running out of time, that another huge thing that they will be, or they should be talking about in Canada this week is the Ukraine conflict. Zelenskyy is there in Canada. Trump spoke to Putin on Saturday about that conflict and where it's headed. We're still seeing nightly raids on Kyiv. There's still no sign of a peace breakthrough. Trump and Zelenskyy are going to sit down this week. We have been confirmed. We try and finish this podcast on something lighter that we've pulled out of the Playbook newsletter.
Oh yeah, lighter things. Let's do that.
We like to do birthdays, we like to do anniversaries, and it is 10 years to the day today that Donald Trump came sailing down that golden escalator in New York and announced he was going to be running for president.
10 years, wow.
A decade of Trump dominating our lives, Dasha, in power, out of power. Just a transformative moment for the United States in retrospect.
1 decade, that is extraordinary. extraordinary. I mean, how many people saw what was coming from that little escalator ride? I don't think anyone could have predicted quite where we are today.
Pretty sure Donald Trump would claim he predicted all of it, but I'm not sure even that would be true. All right, Dasha, we better leave it there because we're out of time. Thank you so much for all of that. Thank you for listening as always. We have much more news and analysis in today's Playbook newsletter, which you can find at politico.com/playbook. And we'll be back tomorrow. Have a great Monday.
Happy Monday.
Bye-bye.